Hey, welcome back to another video. I'm Ivan Calderon, and today we're doing a beat breakdown. Okay, so this is it. This is the last week of the Stuck at Home Beat Challenge. There was a couple beats for you guys to choose from, but the one you picked was the one called Feeling, which was more of like a dance, four on the floor type beat. So without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, so before anything else, let me play you the beat first so we can get an idea of what we're working with. Okay, so this beat started out with a pluck. That pluck is playing this here. Now the thing to note with this progression is that at the end of the day, despite of how it was played, it really is just four chords. We have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Now, what made it special is that I played these chords a few times consecutively to kind of create some sort of pattern. So if you take a look, on the first chord and the third chord, I played them 3 times. So 1, 2, and then 3. Same thing for this one. And then on the second and fourth chord, I played them again 1, 2, and 3, but I added a pickup chord at the end. So instead of it being 1, 2, 3, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it picks back up. So again, to show you, 1, 2, 3, pick up, 1, 2, 3 again, and then the pickup. Now I played this chord progression on the bigger keyboard, the 61 key, but you can do the same thing by drawing in your notes on the piano roll and then chopping them up in this same manner. Now moving on from there, the pluck sounded good, but I wanted a little bit more of a top end element to it, so I found another pluck, duplicated the MIDI, and we got this. So when we play them together, this is a new pluck. And if I take out that second pluck, add it back in. So again, it just adds a little bit more top end sizzle. Moving on from there, the next element that I added was a pad. Now this pad is a bit of a synthy pad, and it sounds like this. It is using the exact same notes from the plucks, same MIDI. And again, this just provides a sort of like foundation for everything to sit on top of. So then if we play these instruments so far together, this is what we have. Now, once we had this down, we moved on to the drums. Now, for this genre, which is dance, the drums are pretty much always the same. It's 4 on the floor, meaning that you're gonna have a kick on every beat and then a snare or a clap or whatever on every 2 and 4. So then that is exactly what I did. If I bring in my kick and my snare, this is what we get. Now, the only thing to point out here is that I did end up layering my kicks. The first one that I brought in was a more dance, kind of EDM deeper kick, and that sounds like this. Now that sounded great, but it didn't have enough knock for me, so what I did was I brought in a second kick, and let me raise the volume a bit so you guys can hear it. That had a bit more knock on the top end of it, so what I did was I combined the two, and then we get this kick. Now, as mentioned from here, I went ahead and I added the snare on every 2 and 4 to create that drum pattern for this genre that we all know very well. But then what I did to make it a little bit more interesting was that I added a clap on every 4. So this at the top and this at the bottom are the kicks. This is going to be the snare, and then this is going to be the clap. Now what this ends up doing is that it creates this sort of like call and response movement within the drums, because you have the snare on every beat, but then you have that clap on the 4, so it ends up sounding like it goes back and forth and back and forth, and again, it just adds a little bit more excitement to the drums. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now, another thing that I want to point out, moving on from here, is that I opted for this beat to not have a closed hi-hat. Closed hi-hats usually serve as like the element in a beat that kind of keeps the rhythm going. It's almost like your metronome, right? But for this beat, I decided to add a shaker instead, and I added it on the upbeat. So the downbeat is 1, the upbeat is and. 1 and 2 and. And again, this is very common in this genre, but that sounds like this. Now at this point, things were sounding great, but I needed more movement, and one of the easiest way to do this is to add some sort of percussive loop. I have been going to town on the percussive loops on Splice, and specifically this shaker loop that I've been using quite a bit. It adds a lot of movement to any beat that you put it on, as long as it sounds good, obviously, but together, it sounds like this. So if I take it out, a lot more sterile, less interesting, but with it, it just keeps it moving nicely. Now the next two elements that I added during this part of the session were a crash, which just kind of comes in the beginning to introduce the whole section, and then an open hat. Now the interesting thing about this open hat is that I added it right before every other clap. So if we take a look here, the clap comes in on the 4 as mentioned before. So there, 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 there. That open hat comes in right here, and then right here, so every other clap, and it sounds like this. Now basically all this really does is just kind of builds up every other clap, which ultimately gives you more ear candy to the drum section and makes it a little bit more interesting. Now moving on from there, we went ahead and we started to program some basses. Now the first bass that I have is a more synthy underwater bass. I use these a lot, and this one sounds like this. And this is really just following the same chord progression from the pluck. Now, movement in this genre in dance is very, very important, it's very critical. So to kind of keep the movement going, I brought in a second bass, which was a live sounding bass. And this is actually Moto Bass from IK Multimedia, a really great plugin, I definitely recommend it. But what I did was I duplicated the MIDI from the synth bass, and then I chopped it up kind of in the same manner as the plucks, and I shortened some of the notes to just kind of create some variation. But now the two basses sound like this. Actually, let me play you the second bass first. And it stops. So if we play those two together, this is what we get. So then if we play the entire drum section at the moment, we get this. Okay, so at this point we have the drums down, and then we have the two plucks and the pad, so the beat up to this moment sounded like this. Now, the last thing that I needed was some sort of lead to bring this all home, and I thought a vocal chop would be perfect. So then what I did was I went to Splice, and I found one that I liked and one that was in the key that I was working in, which in this case, it was D minor. And I found this one. The original vocal chop sounds like this. So then what I did was I chopped it up, rearranged it, and made my own version, which sounds like this. And then it just repeats. So then once we add it to the beat, we get this. Now, the very last element that I added to this beat was a sort of riser, which I actually created by using one of the sample chops that I made while constructing my version of this vocal loop here. So what I did was I brought it down here, I reversed it, and I got this. Now, by using a part of the vocal chop as a riser, this creates a really cohesive intro into the beat, and it just sounds really, really nice. So then once again, once we add all the elements together, the entire beat sounds like this. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, like this video if you like to, subscribe if you're not already, but I'll see you on the next one.